Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we cut through the noise to get you informed fast. Today, we're plunging into a paradox that, honestly, it kind of blew us away when we first looked at the sources.
Yeah.
Imagine a country celebrated globally for fairness, right? A place that proudly boasts the largest share of social housing in the entire developed world. We're talking about a third of all homes here. You'd instinctively think that means, well, accessible, affordable living for everyone, wouldn't you?
That's certainly the popular assumption, yeah. It seems logical. But our sources, they paint a very different picture for the Netherlands. This same nation also struggles with the most overburdened rental market. Get this. An astounding 25% of its citizens are spending over 40% of their income just on rent.
40%, wow. That's a massive financial burden for a quarter of the population.
Yeah.
And it absolutely signals that something has gone, well, fundamentally wrong.
Exactly. Something is definitely awry.
So that's the core paradox we're here to unpack today. How did a system designed with such a strong social mission, a cornerstone of fairness, end up leading to this level of distress? Some people are even calling it a living hell for many residents. You've provided us with a stack of really insightful sources, historical accounts, economic stats, the whole lot. Our mission today is to peel back those layers, understand the long-term trends, and really reveal the surprising factors that led here. We want to move beyond those gut-level assumptions and see the whole complex picture.
Absolutely. And to really understand this, we need to go back, way back. This journey doesn't start recently. It's rooted in these dramatic shifts of the mid-1800s.
Okay, so take us back there, mid-1850s Netherlands. What was happening that kind of set the stage for this huge focus on housing?
Well, it was rapid urbanization. The Industrial Revolution was in full swing. The working class was flooding into cities, Amsterdam, Rotterdam, the head drawn by factory jobs, and the scale of it was just incredible. In like 3 decades, the populations of these cities more than doubled.
Doubled in 30 years. That kind of explosive growth must have put immense pressure on housing, surely. What were the conditions like for these workers, and how did society begin to respond?
Oh, the conditions were incredibly poor. Overcrowded, unsanitary, frankly, inhumane.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just about comfort, right? It hit their health hard and, their productivity, too. This widespread misery, it prompted a response. A new kind of entity started appearing. The Baen, or housing associations.
Housing associations, okay. What were they like back then?
Initially, they were private companies. They actually had shareholders and everything. By about 1900, there were around 200 of them. They housed maybe 10,000 families. So a small segment, really. But it was the seed, the very beginning of this social housing idea.
Right, a seed planted. But then something absolutely huge happened that just transformed everything. World War II. What did the war do to this growing housing landscape?
Devastating. Simply devastating for housing. Nearly a fifth of all Dutch homes were damaged or destroyed. We're talking a massive shortage. 250,000 homes gone or unusable. The government faced this unprecedented crisis. It demanded a monumental, immediate solution.
Okay, 250,000 homes short. So what was that solution? How did the government step in and fundamentally change things for social housing?
Yeah, this is where the story gets really interesting. The government effectively stepped in and, well, sort of nationalized the mission of these existing housing associations. They put them under tight supervision, poured billions of euros into them, billions, and their role completely changed. It wasn't just housing workers anymore. The new mission: supply hundreds of thousands of affordable homes for all Dutch citizens, regardless of income.
All citizens. So this is a truly national effort. The sources call it a building frenzy. What was the actual impact of that post-war drive?
Oh, the impact was transformative, absolutely. Between 1950 and 1980, 2.5 million new homes were added. That almost doubled the entire housing stock. Think about that.
Wow, doubled it.
Yeah, and the housing shortage, it plummeted. From 300,000 right after the war in 45, down to a much more manageable 75,000 by 1970. During this whole period, these housing associations became, well, basically a crucial extension of the government. They were fulfilling this critical public need for affordable homes.
That sounds like a remarkable success story, honestly. A massive problem tackled head on. But then, as that shortage eased, policies started shifting again. This is the 80s and 90s, right? What was the new focus? How did that start to reshape the housing market?
Right. As the immediate crisis passed, the focus pivoted. It moved towards encouraging home ownership. Back in 1945, most people rented. But over the years, that figure dropped substantially, down to 19% eventually. owning a home became much more common, and this was partly encouraged by specific tax breaks. The most famous one was colloquially known as the HIPPO for homeowners.
The hippo. Okay, we'll definitely need to circle back to that. But it's important to note here, social housing itself actually peaked during this era, didn't it, before these shifts really took hold?
Yes, absolutely. Good point. Social housing hit its peak at 43% of all homes in 1989, a huge share. But, the government, having poured billions in, started to feel it was time for these associations to be more self-sufficient, stand on their own feet. So the direct funding was cut, and from the mid-1990s onwards, they were expected to operate basically as nonprofit private businesses. They still had their social mission, but crucially, without those direct government subsidies.
That sounds like a really unique approach. A nonprofit business with a social mission, but no direct state funding. What kind of housing model did this create in the end, this mix of social goals and market principles?
It created this singular hybrid model, really unlike anything else. It wasn't state-owned like in, socialist countries, but it wasn't purely market-driven like in the U.S. either. And this hybrid model, while it sounds innovative, well, it started to show cracks. The key thing, I think, is that by trying to straddle these two worlds, housing as a social good, and letting it become a tool for building wealth, it kind of baked in these fundamental conflicts. It inadvertently set the stage for, future inequality.
And that conflict, that tension, it really jumps out when we look at that HIPPO tax break you mentioned, the one for homeowners. Can you break that down for us? How did this policy, which sounds like it was meant to help people buy homes, end up creating such a big divide?
Absolutely. Let's look at the numbers and makes it clearer. Say you bought a typical house, maybe $500,000, you get a 30-year mortgage, let's say 4% interest. Over the life of that loan, you'd rack up about $360,000 just in interest payments.
Okay, a lot of interest.
Right. But here's the kicker. That interest was tax deductible.
Ah, so what did that mean in real terms for the homeowner?
It meant homeowners could save over 130,000 euros in taxes over that mortgage term, just from deducting the interest.
Over 100,000 euros back from the tax system. That's substantial.
It's a huge financial advantage, yeah, for someone who owns their home. But now think about your neighbor, renting a similar house right next door. What benefit did they get from the system?
Nothing. They got none of it. No tax break like that at all. So the system, maybe unintentionally, created this massive economic gap. Homeowners getting this big government support, renters getting, nothing comparable.
Exactly, a significant divide. And that was just one piece of a growing puzzle, because the years right after deregulation, they were also marked by scandals, weren't they?
Yeah, the sources mentioned some pretty big ones.
Indeed. These scandals were like a flashing red light, warning signs that the oversight wasn't keeping up with this new hybrid structure. A really prominent example, a major housing association in Rotterdam. They bought a retired cruise ship, the SS Rotterdam, for $30 million.
A cruise ship? What was a housing association doing buying a cruise ship?
Well, their stated plan was to convert it into a hotel and a tourist attraction, which, immediately raised eyebrows. Their core mission, remember, was nonprofit affordable housing.
Right. Seems a bit off mission, and the financial side of it.
That's where it got truly staggering. The initial renovation estimate was around $6 million. It ended up costing an astounding $256 million.
Whoa. From $6 million to over $250 million.
Exactly. Stories like these, they got a lot of press, and they fueled this major public debate about whether these associations, now operating without direct subsidies, needed much, much more regulation and oversight.
So these scandals weren't just isolated incidents. They seem like symptoms, maybe, warning signs about the system's vulnerabilities. What did the early 2010s then reveal about the health of this hybrid model, especially in a place like Amsterdam?
Yeah, we saw more cracks appearing then. In Amsterdam, especially highest cost of living, toughest place to find affordable housing associations, actually began selling off their assets, en masse.
Selling off their housing stock.
Yeah, selling off properties. This drastically reduced the available affordable housing stock right in the city centers where it was needed most.
And the knock-on effect of selling those assets.
Well, private rental prices started shooting up much faster than the regulated social rents, which of course just contributed to the higher overall cost of living and made the affordability crisis worse, particularly in the cities.
Okay, so less affordable stock, rising private rents. Then, in 2013, the government brought in another major policy, the shareholders having, the landlord levy. What was the thinking behind this tax? And crucially, what did it actually achieve?
So the government's stated goals for this levy, which forced housing associations to pay billions of euros to the state, were kind of twofold. One, make it easier for people to buy homes. Two, pushed more houses into the private market. That was the idea.
Okay, that was the intention, but the actual outcomes, what does the data show?
Well, the data suggests pretty much the opposite happened. The rate of homeownership actually flatlined. It didn't go up. And maybe even worse, the levy made it much harder for the housing associations to actually build new homes, which of course directly hit the supply problem, made it worse.
Wow. So unintended consequences hitting hard there. And as if things weren't complicated enough, what other factors started piling on top of this growing crisis? Unexpected things.
There were several other big ones, yeah. Compounding factors. In 2019, there was a major court ruling. It forced the Netherlands to significantly cut nitrogen emissions. Now, environmentally important, obviously, but the immediate effect, it froze 18,000 construction projects overnight.
18,000 projects frozen, including housing.
Including the planned construction of 75,000 housing units, just stopped. A huge hit to new supply.
75,000 units, just like that. And you mentioned construction was already slowing down anyway.
Yeah.
And the shortage was growing. Can you put the scale of that shortage into perspective for us? It sounds massive.
It is massive. Think about this. After World War II, right? In
Yeah.
1845, the Netherlands faced that huge housing shortage we talked about 300,000 homes needed due to war destruction. Fast forward to today, the projected shortage for 2025 is 450,000 homes.
Wait, 450,000,
Yeah.
that's numerically greater than the shortage right after World War II.
Exactly, numerically larger. More homes short now than after a devastating global conflict. It's quite stunning when you frame it like that.
That is genuinely stunning.
Yeah.
What else was feeding into this perfect storm?
Foreign investment became a really big factor too, especially in cities. In 2020, get this, 1 in every 3 homes sold in Amsterdam went to foreign buyers.
1 in 3.
1 in 3. So naturally, this sparked a really heated public debate, and it led most major cities in 2021 to implement something called operating purchase protection. Basically, rules aimed at stopping investors from buying up homes that would otherwise be lived in by owners.
Okay, so you have supply choked off, regulations changing, foreign investment pouring in. The pressure on ordinary people must have been immense. What was the public reaction to this spiraling housing crisis?
Oh, the public outcry was deafening. And completely understandable. Housing costs basically doubled in just 10 years, between 2012 and 2022. Home prices alone jumped 20% in just 1 year, 2021 to 2022. Just huge increases.
20% in 1 year?
Yeah, so this led to massive protests. Over 15,000 people marched in 2021. It was the largest housing protest the country had seen in decades. It just became starkly clear that the policies meant to provide more affordable homes, make buying easier, make renting cheaper, create more equality. Well, for many, many people, they were failing. Miserably.
So, given this whole history, this complex web of issues we've discussed, where does that leave things now? What's the current government's approach? And does it suggest they still believe in that social housing model?
Well, the current government has set a really ambitious target. They aim to build 900,000 new homes by 2030.
900,000, that's a huge number.
It is. And significantly, a third of those 300,000 homes are expected to be built and managed by the social housing organizations. So yes, that clearly indicates a continued belief, a reliance actually, on that social housing approach as a fundamental part of the solution, despite all the challenges we've seen.
Okay, and this really brings us back full circle, doesn't it? Back to that initial paradox. It's clearly not as simple as saying, oh, they have lots of social housing, therefore the rental market is broken. That's that gut-level assumption that, as we've unpacked, just misses the real story.
Exactly. Stepping back, you see the full scope. This crisis isn't from one single cause. Not at all. It stems from decades of just not building enough homes overall. Then you add construction being held back by things like the nitrogen emission goals, population growing faster than expected, homes being bought up purely as investments, really strict land use rules, labor shortages in construction, rising building costs. It's truly multifaceted.
And so much of it seems rooted in policy choices, doesn't it? The Dutch, with this incredibly strong social mission historically, they've continuously tried to balance that with market ideas. And it seems like maybe they've sometimes swung too far one way or the other, leading to these unforeseen negative consequences.
That's a very good way to put it. And what's really remarkable here, I think, is that the Netherlands is, in many ways, navigating completely uncharted territory. This precise mix, the history, the hybrid model, the specific policy choices, these compounding challenges like nitrogen and investment, this exact combination hasn't really been tackled anywhere else quite like this. It makes their journey a unique and honestly a really complex case study for the whole world watching.
So we've taken quite a dunk dive today
Mm.
into this fascinating, often surprising journey of the Dutch housing market, from its roots in, post-industrial squalor all the way to this current state of crisis. It's just so clear that what looks like a simple problem on the surface is actually this incredibly complex interplay. History, economics, environmental rules, shifting social values, it's all in there.
Absolutely. And I think the Dutch experience really shows us something important. It shows that even with the best intentions, even with innovative models like their hybrid system, achieving a truly equitable and affordable housing market is incredibly challenging, just really, really hard. It raises this vital question for all of us, really. When governments try to balance a core social mission, like housing, with market-oriented principles, how do you find that delicate balance? How do you avoid those unintended consequences, those negative side effects, and actually ensure the well-being of all your citizens? What can their journey teach us about designing policy in these super complex, interconnected systems? And maybe how do we avoid falling into similar traps when we try to balance our own lofty ideals with market realities?